Hello, everyone. It's Shane Conto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network. And this is my monthly show where a guest and I gush over my favorite movies. And this particular film was one of the first DVDs I ever bought. I am very excited to talk about this. This is obviously one of my favorite films, and that is The Untouchables from 1987 from director Brian De Palma, starring Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, Robert De Niro, and plenty of others. And joining me for this episode is my buddy Griff. Griff, thank you so much for coming on.
Shane, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Love talking movies with Griff. We go way back. We've known each other for probably like 13 years at this point. So, and it's always fun chatting movies. And this is definitely a classic. Giving just a bit of a synopsis here, we have during Prohibition, Treasury agent Elliot Ness sets out to stop ruthless Chicago gangster Al Capone and assembles a small, incorruptible team to help him. And this is indeed based off of the television series with Robert Stack, who played Elliot Ness, which I. But my background with this is my mom showed me this, and she used to watch like the show when she was a kid. And I remember watching this when I was like 12, maybe, for the first time. And I really loved it ever since then. And like I said, this was one of my first DVDs. I've had this on physical media for like, I don't know, 22 years at this point. I just got a new nice 4K edition of the film, which this looked so nice. But Griff, what was your history background with the film?
The Untouchables was the first R-rated movie my parents allowed me to watch.
Nice.
And this was sometime in the 90s, 97 or 98, I
Mhm.
think. I bought it on video cassette. And then eventually, when that wore out, I got it on DVD. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's been one of my top 10 ever since. But going back to the Robert Stack TV show, I
Mhm.
never watched an episode of that. But in the early 90s, there was a TV movie that Robert Stack did called The Return of Elliot Ness. And
Oh.
so and surprisingly, I was able to buy the DVD at Hillsborough Cinemas where I used to work. And it was pretty good, seeing Robert Stack's Ellie and Ness at that age. Pretty good movie. But of course, it was nothing compared to Brian De Palma's Untouchables. And I'm sure it was nothing compared to the Robert Stack TV show.
Yeah, it's hard to I was about to say it's hard to stack up against a classic television series. Haha, Robert Stack. You're all
Yeah.
welcome. I hope you enjoyed that. Um, but one point that I wanted to really start off with is because this is the first De Palma film that I've talked about on this show. And this is like by far my favorite Brian De Palma film. And I guess Griff, what's your experience with Brian De Palma and his filmography?
If I'm not mistaken, the first Brian De Palma movie I ever saw was Mission Impossible.
Okay.
It, yeah, first time I saw that was in the mid 90s, I guess maybe the year before I watched The Untouchables. And I wasn't fully aware of Brian De Palma's reputation as a filmmaker. It was after I watched The Untouchables, I became more aware of his other work, Dress to Kill and Body Double, Blowout,
Mhm.
movies like that, realizing, what a dark, intense filmmaker that he actually is. He was definitely influenced by suspense thriller directors like Hitchcock.
Absolutely. Which very interesting point, Griff. My first De Palma movie was also Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
I also had that. I had that on VHS, and I remember distinctly watching that when I was a kid back in the '90s. Which what a just quick side note. What a ridiculously talented group of directors that have made Mission Impossible films, and it all started with Brian De Palma. And look at him taking old school, like crime thriller kind of TV shows and bringing them to the big screen between Mission Impossible and The Untouchables. Um, I think my biggest take on De Palma is obviously one of his most famous films is Scarface. I do not like that movie very much. I'm it's never been one that I really connected with, but I have watched a lot of his films in the past couple years because I went back and saw Phantom of the Paradise. I saw Dress to Kill, Blowout, Body Double, which Blowout legitimately is. If I think about the past 5 years, Blowout's probably one of the movies that I watched for the first time and just was like, wow, I absolutely love this movie. And it became like a pretty solid, high up there movie for me. I even rewatched it. I got it on Criterion. I'm a big fan of that film. But to your point, Griff, if you watch most of his films, you're going to see a lot of Hitchcock for
Yeah.
sure. And he really channels that. And I always found it interesting because De Palma's kind of like the fifth wheel of those like 70s directors. Because like he's friends with, he's the fifth friend of Coppola and Scorsese and Lucas and Spielberg. And he's kind of the one that just was like, he didn't go into like the big prestige cinema like Scorsese and Coppola. He didn't go into the
Right.
big blockbusters like Lucas and Spielberg. Just kind of did his own thing. And honestly, I appreciate him for it.
Yeah, I do too. In fact, going back to Blowout, I never
Mhm.
saw Blowout in its entirety. I've only seen clips of it, but I know that's one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies.
That does not surprise me at all. Like, at all. And I imagine he probably watched Blowout and was like, I'm going to get John Travolta in one of my movies.
Yeah, I think Blowout was one of the primary reasons, if not the primary reason, why Tarantino cast Travolta in Pulp Fiction.
Well, and I could see that. Like, I feel like John Travolta has become kind of like a butt of a joke at this point. But
Mm,
like he got nominated for an Oscar for Saturday Night Fever, and he was great in that. And then
yeah.
he was great in Blowout, obviously Grease. And then, the rest of the 80s kind of weren't exactly the best for John Travolta. But you got Pulp Fiction in the 90s happened and really brought him back to the forefront. But there's I've also seen, just to run out there, I've seen Carlito's Way as well and Carrie.
Yes.
Um, I feel like I watched Femme Fatale years ago, but I do not remember anything about it except for some of the obvious things. Like there's a lot of nudity in that movie for sure. Which that's the thing. Brian De Palma had no problem just going all out there, making films about adult film stars and sex workers and stuff like that. He was like Sean Baker before Sean Baker even was anywhere near camera. Um, but yeah, go ahead, Griff.
I remember when Femme Fatale was out in theaters in 2002, but I didn't see it until after I saw the documentary called De Palma, and it was okay, but definitely doesn't compare with his earlier work. It definitely wasn't, the Body Double or the Untouchables
Yeah,
or even Scarface, which I really liked.
yeah. I actually very distinctly loved that De Palma documentary from Noah Baumbach.
Mhm.
It was so simple. It's just like point a camera at this man and let him take us through his career. And it's very engrossing. De Palma is a very interesting person to listen to talk about his filmography. But he's a very interesting director. And I feel like The Untouchables is one of the least De Palma on paper movies out of all the ones that he's done. But then if you actually watch it, you realize there's so many De Palma moments throughout this film, which we'll get to when we start talking about the film.
Mhm.
But I also felt obligated to talk about one of my favorite actors of all time and the man who won his first ever Oscar for The Untouchables, and that is Sean Connery. Um, I don't know about you, Griff, but I've been watching Sean Connery movies since I was a kid, whether it was all of his James Bond movies, Darby O'Gill and the Little People, which I've been watching since I was a little kid, Entrapment. Um, when I was 12, 13 years old, nothing was better in the world than League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and Van Helsing. And Sean Connery as Alan Quartermain in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. But and Highlander and so many other films that Sean Connery popped up in. But Griff, what's your background with Sean Connery as an actor?
I don't remember the first Sean Connery movie I saw, but I remember the first Sean Connery James Bond movie I saw, which was
Hmm,
From Russia with Love. I bought it on
so good.
video cassette at Blockbuster, now realizing it was the second movie I probably should have gotten Dr. No first, but this was right when I was getting into action movies. I loved, Pierce Brosnan. At that time, Brosnan only did
Yeah.
GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies. So I wanted to see more James Bond movies, and From Russia with Love was the first one that came up for me. And then after that, I branched out to Connery's other movies like The Rock and The Hunt for Red October, Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade.
Which Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is my favorite Spielberg movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the dynamic between him and Harrison Ford in that movie. It's just absolutely incredible. And that's such a great performance from Sean Connery because he strips away over out of like all the uberly masculine traits that he brings to most of his roles. And he's just like, look what you did. Look what you did, Junior. And just like him just being such like a nerdy old guy, but then also like don't mess with him. Because there's a couple of moments where he gives a look and I'm like, well, there's Sean Connery right there. And he was incredible as Bond. Obviously, he is James Bond for a lot of people. I also grew up watching Pierce Brosnan because he was my Bond as a kid. GoldenEye took up a big chunk of my childhood. But Sean Connery, incredible, and it made me so happy to find out that he won an Oscar for this
Mm-hmm.
because he is so good in this movie, so good in the Untouchables, and he just I'm pretty sure he won Sexiest Man Alive around the same exact time he won this Oscar.
Yes,
And
he
dude
did.
was almost 60 at that point. And it's just like people know sex appeal when they see it, and it's obviously a balding Scotsman with a lisp. Um, but it's Sean Connery. It's like watching Entrapment and being like, of course Catherine Zeta Jones would fall in love with Sean Connery,
Yeah.
which
Yeah, yeah, what woman wouldn't?
exactly. And it's just like one of those kinds of things where I wish that the film industry did not beat him down enough to make him quit acting after League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. But alas, that's what happened. And, he was also a very vain man. And I'm sure he didn't want people to keep watching him growing old on screen and stuff like that. But that movie still has a special place in my heart. I recently rewatched that, and I'm just like, is this a great movie? No, but like, is it nostalgic for me? And is it a lot of fun? Yes, yes, it is.
I personally think Sean Connery ended his movie career on a good note, not only with The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but also Finding Forrester as well.
That's a great one too.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that in English class, I think, in middle school. And that's such a good performance for him. And, you know, say what you will about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, he did not like sleepwalk through that movie.
No.
Like he committed to that role. And it's so interesting because he could have easily just, phoned that in, but he didn't. And what's so crazy is he got offered Gandalf in Lord of the Rings and turned it down. He got
Mhm.
offered Morpheus in The Matrix and turned it down
Right.
because he's like, I don't get these. They're just weird. And then that's what got him to do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen because I think they were going to give him like legitimately like 10 or 15% stake in Lord of the Rings. Can you imagine how much money he would have made off of that?
Yeah, I couldn't even
Insane
imagine.
amount of money. Insane amount of money. And I think that's why he took a chance on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. But like even some of his other 90s stuff like First Night and Dragonheart, where he voiced that dragon,
Yeah,
Draco.
Yeah, I remember First Night being really good. I haven't seen Dragonheart yet. I mean to, but also a couple other Connery movies that stand out are ones he did in the mid to late '70s: The Man Who Would Be King and The Wind and
Yes.
the Lion.
I haven't seen The Wind and the Lion, but I really enjoyed The Man Who Would Be King. Him and Michael Caine have such great chemistry together and were so much fun together in that movie for sure. Um, Even like Time Bandits, which I'm a huge Terry Gilliam fan, and he played King Agamemnon.
Right.
In that there's just so many great roles, and there's still some that like I need to check out, like The Wind and the Lion, or even like I know he did The Great Train Robbery in 1978. I don't know how good of a movie that is, and also one that's just morbidly curious is Zardoz.
Yeah. The
I've
I'll
seen
let you.
him.
I'll let you borrow my DVD copy of The Wind and the Lion.
Okay,
Um, So yeah, Zardoz I saw on TV once a long time ago. It was okay, not great, not terrible. I know it has that, cult following, but
yeah,
I didn't think it was anything to write home about.
I
Uh,
have seen him in that outfit.
yeah, that's what everybody remembers about that movie, that embarrassing outfit, to put it lightly.
Oh my god. He might as well just walked around in a Speedo at that point. Oh man. But no, obviously Sean Connery had an amazing career and made an impact on a lot of different people. And was it like this guy does like after all these years, Sean Connery deserves to get an Oscar? He earned it. Like this is
Yes.
one of those like legacy Oscars that he really earned it for the Untouchables. He put in the work. He's so good in this movie. Now, kind of getting into the actual film, the big looming shadow in this is, real life gangster Al Capone, which I don't know about you, Griff. I could watch Robert De Niro going insanely over the top playing Al Capone again and again and again and again. He's just so endlessly entertaining.
Yeah, De Niro was De Palma's first choice for Capone, and when De Niro accepted the role, he was very concerned about, the shape, the stomach, the face,
Yeah,
how it would turn out. He even went to Al Capone's tailor to get the clothes all made up,
of
and
course he did.
and interestingly enough, Bob Hoskins was on standby, in case if De Niro decided to back out, Hoskins would be around to do it. And this was actually De Niro's third movie with De Palma, the first movie that De Niro did with De Palma. In fact, I think it might have been both of their first. It was a movie called
Yeah,
Greetings.
yeah, because I distinctly remember from that De Palma documentary that De Niro really started early with him and
Yeah,
then jumped into doing some of Scorsese's work,
right. Yeah, it
which,
was.
okay.
Yeah, they did Greetings and then Hi Mom and then The Untouchables. Yeah, the only three they've done, at least so far anyway.
Yeah, which there's still a chance because De Palma's still out there. I
Hmm.
did watch Domino, his most recent movie. Um, there's like glimpses of De Palma still in there, and I'm tempted to see if he winds up making another feature film, but no, De Niro just goes for it because this whole entire film is bombastic. Because like one thing that De Palma's not is subtle, and this movie is not subtle, and De Niro's performance as Al Capone is certainly not subtle. And I just love from like you get through the whole entire credits, and then it's just that overhead shot of him on that like barber chair about to get shaved, and then it comes down, and De Niro's going full De Niro. You all can't see me because this is an audio podcast, but he's
Yeah.
wagging his finger and he's looking like this, and just I don't know why I quote this on a regular basis, but he's just like, I want this Elliot Ness dead. I want his family dead. I want to burn his house to the ground, and I want to show him piss on all the ashes. And I left out some extra lines in there that had more expletives in there. But you
Mhm.
get the point.
Yeah.
He's just so intimidating and big in his role. And that whole entire God, that whole scene at that banquet where he's like, baseball. When you play baseball, you're part of a team. And he's just carrying that bat and the look that he gives, and then beats that man's head in with a baseball bat. And just very De Palma, that overhead shot of just the blood going out on like the white tablecloth and everything is just like, damn, that was hard. And like they do not present Capone as anything more than he is a big, boisterous, dangerous, angry man. And De Niro got the message and delivered because that's
Mm.
exactly what he does in this movie.
Yeah, that he did.
Which, like, is it a performance with depth and range? No, but like it is so hammy and fun that you can't not enjoy watching it. Which also that's very interesting that you brought up Bob Hoskins. I guess Bob Hoskins had a whole entire run of being potential Italian people. Between him doing the Mario Brothers movie as Mario, and then that would have been interesting though. He did have that kind of energy. It would have been interesting to see him play Capone, but De Niro just committed so hard to it. I'm glad that I got to see that for sure.
Mhm.
Obviously we talked about Sean Connery as an actor, but I just love him in this film because he's the most, well, I guess Elliot Ness is the most earnest person in this movie, but Malone is so true to like exactly what he means. And he doesn't mess around. He tells it just like it is. I love that opening scene, that first scene with Malone and Ness, where Ness like throws something into the river and he tries to like cite him for littering. And he's like, I'm a treasury officer. It's like, okay. And he's like, wait, I didn't like the line is so good because he's just like, how do you know I wasn't lying? It's like, who would say that they are, that they weren't? Because like, who would tell you they're a treasury officer if they're gonna pretend to be a cop?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because Malone has like such good like BS detector because he just sees through so much stuff and there's some really genuine moments. He has some great lines, like that whole entire thing. It's like they send one of yours to the hospital. You send one of those to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. And there's so many great lines and wisdom from Malone, and he's such a great character. And God, his death in this movie kills
That
me
that was the
every
saddest.
time. Every time. And Sean Connery is acting to the heavens in that death scene. And him just like gurgling through the blood and being like, what are you gonna do? And I'm just like, damn, Sean Connery went hard for this movie, and he's so good in it for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's like you said earlier, Shane. He definitely deserved that Oscar.
He went for it and deserved it. What do you think about Kevin Costner in this?
I think actually, yeah, The Untouchables was the first Kevin Costner movie I ever saw, and yeah, he definitely brought a tenderness to Elliot Ness, which is what they actually wanted because
Mm.
I guess it was the producers who didn't want Elliot Ness to be portrayed as a tough guy in this movie. They wanted to have that tenderness aspect to it, so which is part of the reason why they got Costner for it. Originally, they cast Jack Nicholson in it, but for whatever reason, that didn't happen. I don't know why. I don't know what happened there. Why Nicholson backed out of it, but then Costner came in it, and the rest is history.
That is a whole entire different movie. That is a whole entire different vibe. That is not the Elliot Ness that we get in this movie. Would I want to see it? Probably, because Jack Nicholson's one of the all-time great actors. But no, there's a tenderness, there is a sincerity
Yes.
that Kevin Costner brings to this character, because that's the thing. He has to be that like squeaky clean kind of guy, and you need to buy into that, like when he gets pushed over the edge, or he pushes Billy Drago over the edge.
Hmm.
um which that is one of the most satisfying movie moments I feel like ever, is when Billy Drago as Nitty's just like, he squealed like a stuck Irish pig. And Ness is not going to let that go. And that great shot where it turns POV, where the camera like grabs him and he just like flies off. And there's a little fire in Kevin Costner in that moment. That, and also when he goes straight to Capone's hotel after Wallace gets killed, and he like gets in Capone's face. And Capone's just like, a lot of talking a badge, and
Hmm.
like getting really big behind 15 guys getting in between them. But I think Kevin Costner does a really fine job with this film. And this is obviously before he started getting like a little bit more rugged as he got older. But and this is just a few years before he hit it big with Dances with Wolves too,
Right.
with his Oscar and everything. But I think he does a really fine job here. And then you have like Charles Martin Smith, who basically is just a director now, making like animal movies, like A Dog's Purpose and stuff like that.
Right.
I
Right.
love him as Wallace, and that was so devastating to me when I watched this for the first time, and literally every other time since. But he's so genuine, and you just feel for him. He's just a little accountant, and then he gets to have his big hero moment with the raid on that bridge between Canada and the United States,
Right.
and even just like gets a little bit of the alcohol as it comes out. But God, that scene in the elevator, that hard cut of like his terrified face cut, and you hear the gunshot in the distance. And when they find him, like that gets me every time. If you need to know a scene that's going to get me emotional watching a movie, it's that one. And just touchable, written in the blood as that camera pans over. I'm like, damn. Those are some of like those De Palma moments really standing out in this.
Yeah, definitely. It gets me too every time, Shane.
And then Andy Garcia also was making a career for himself playing Italian people at this point. Because like obviously he was Vincent in The Godfather Part 3, Sonny's son. And then here he's George Stone is like, George Stone, what's your real name before you changed it? And I love that interaction with him and Sean Connery, where he like pulls the gun out and he's just like, I like him. And just like that whole entire dynamic. Because like Andy Garcia doesn't get to say much in this movie, but he has presence, and like even the big climactic stare sequence, he's the hero. He's that sharpshooter, and got a little bit of Chekhov's gun skills when they showed him just destroying that target earlier. I'm like, he's definitely going to make a trick shot somewhere, and he
Hmm.
does, and it's super satisfying.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess, Griff, are there any other characters that really stood out to you? Maybe performances or anything in the cast?
Actually, I think you covered all of them. Costner, Connery, De Niro. Yeah, Garcia was definitely a favorite. And, as we mentioned before, De Niro was, amazing as Capone. And, yeah, I think the true villain of the story, aside from Capone, was, Billy Drago as Nitty.
And Billy Drago, I don't think he's in a lot of like very key films. Like I distinctly remember him being in Delta Force too.
Yeah, I was
Um,
going to say. Yeah.
because I used to watch Delta Force with my mom a lot. Got that Chuck Norris going on, and him in that and this, and then I'm also Griff, I might be the biggest Tremors fan that you've probably ever met. And he was in the fourth Tremors movie that was a straight to sci-fi original film. And he played a gunslinger on the Old West when they made it like a prequel of Tremor, like the Graboids in the Old West.
Yeah, I never saw Tremors.
Well, Griff, if you ever want to borrow any of the seven of them, I own all of them.
Well,
So,
yeah, definitely the first one with Kevin Bacon I like to see, but also Drago. Just a couple years before the Untouchables, he was in Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider. He played one of Marshall Stockburn's men.
oh yeah, he did. There's some very interesting character actors in that movie. They got Richard Kiel, Jaws from James Bond,
Right.
where he just wrecks him with that sledgehammer.
Yeah,
That's such a great
ice,
moment.
ice.
Such a great moment.
Yeah, and yeah,
Um,
Chris Penn, Sean Penn's brother.
yeah, for sure. Um, I just want to kind of highlight some of the Griff, what are some of like the filmmaking moments that really stood out to you in this film?
But probably the train station sequence more than anything else. Definitely one of the best action sequences. And a little did I know, it was an homage to Battleship Potemkin, one of the movies you ran at Writers Film Club.
Yes, which it's so interesting, and that's why there's sailors on the steps
Right.
in the Untouchables. Was De Palma wanted to add that little like extra nod to that film, which you see on the Odessa step sequence, a baby carriage rolling down the steps, and this is peak De Palma. This might be the best De Palma directing ever. Is this action sequence because the slow motion is incredible. The editing is so good. Every moment of every frame of where the camera is, those close ups, how they, because when you're shooting an action sequence, you really need to have like the logic of the space. And you never lose that here because you know where that baby is, you know where Stone is, you know where
Yes.
Ness is, and how it's all moving and everything. And that perfect moment where Stone slides in, gets the carriage, and still has the gun pointed up. And it's like he's gonna nail that guy right in the head. And that great moment where he shoots, and De Palma chose to keep the camera on the bookkeeper, and he's like shaking, and you just see the guy behind him, the blood spurt out of his mouth, and him just fall down with the blood on the wall, and you're just like, damn, De Palma went hard in this sequence in this movie. But there's one thing that he loves to do, which is that having somebody in the extreme close up like front, and then something all the way in the background still in focus. There's a great shot with the opera singer like right up in the camera, and then you
Right.
see Capone all the way in the background on that balcony. That's such a great moment. That like high angle shot of Ness and Malone at the church
Mm-hmm.
is such a good moment. And the whole entire sequence where they try to kill Malone, that long POV shot of that guy like lurking through his house and following him through the whole thing. You know how hard that is to make work, and like they had to do that in one take is
Wow.
insane to me. And like that perfect moment where Malone turns and he has the shotgun, and he's like, I'm not gonna say it. I am, being Italian.
Me
I'm not gonna
too.
drop. We're not gonna drop the slurs here, but
No.
that was a very powerful moment where he says that. But then that horrible, like him making that turn, and you just see Billy Drago there, and you're like, and he got him so bad. But that whole sequence is incredible, and how well that's put together for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the art direction, the costuming, and everything. God, I want so many of these outfits that are in this movie. These suits are so sharp and just like chef's kiss, just amazing for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, especially De Niro going to Capone's tailor to get the costumes.
Well, and let me bring up costume department. Giorgio Armani
Mm,
did the wardrobe for this movie. So like this was legit. Like these were really nice clothes
yeah,
and everything. And they De Palma really captured the period extremely well with everything. And you know, outfits that wind up being a decently important piece to this movie because you have all the police, the quote unquote real policemen in the police outfits, and you even have that moment between Malone and Mike getting in that confrontation because, like, it's like, what are you doing, Jimmy? Like dressing like this instead of like dressing like a cop.
Right.
And those moments just really work. And also, Sean Connery's fit in this movie is incredible. Now, I don't want to say my favorite part of this movie is the music, but my God, the music is amazing in this. And you know why? Because it's Ennio Morricone.
Yeah, of course, definitely one of the great composers among the top five.
He is probably my personal favorite, but yeah, he is hands down one of like the elite composers in the history of cinema. It made me so happy that he finally won an Oscar. And I would also like to argue that that was also a really well earned legacy Oscar because even just the opening track from The Hateful Eight is incredible. It's
Yes.
so well put together. And but this soundtrack, you have the do 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 do, and it's just like do 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 do. That whole entire opening sequence over incredible credits, mind you, like the
Mm,
shadow and the lighting on like the Untouchables and everything, and that whole entire opening theme to this, and then the very like triumphant the and when they like pan up and look at all of Chicago, like downtown and everything, you just have that like sprawling music that just gets you so hyped up. Morricone makes quite a few really impressive pieces of music throughout this film. It isn't just like, hey, this has an incredible theme over the credits. No, everything really works. There's dark, ominous tracks, especially in those moments where like something bad's gonna happen. You even have it's like the do 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 whenever you get to like Capone stuff, and it's just like something sounds slightly off, but it's also like big and bombastic because that's him. Just the score's so incredible for this, and I want to know what beat him for best score for this year. Actually, if you have anything to add, Griff, I'm going to let you do that, and I'm going to look up what won best score this year at the
yeah.
Oscars.
Yeah,
But like,
yeah, that documentary about him that came out a year or two ago, amazing, very long, but it was worth it.
I have that documentary on DVD because I will sit and watch that 3 hour documentary about Ennio Morricone
Mm.
again and again and again and again. Just they leveraged his music so amazingly throughout that film. As I'm killing time here. So this would have been the 88 Oscars, right? For the
Right,
films of
right.
so let's see. Sean Connery won Best Supporting Actor. I'm looking at who he faced off. He beat Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman. And Albert Brooks from Broadcast News. I do love him in that. And then Vincent Gardenia in Moonstruck, which
Mm.
Moonstruck is a good Paisan movie for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, Moonstruck was really good.
Oh, I know what beat it because this was the year of The Last Emperor, which won a whole bunch of Oscars.
Yeah, I didn't see that one. I know it's Bernardo Bertolucci. Oh, but you know what? My friend Tom, he if I recall correctly, he saw The Last Emperor and said it was good. But going back to the Great Train Robbery, he saw that too and he said that it was good.
Nice.
Connery and Donald Sutherland.
Now, The Last Emperor is a really good movie. And Ryuichi Sakamoto, along with David Byrne, of all people, of the Talking Heads, wound up doing the score for The Last Emperor.
Hmm.
Which, like, the score is really good, but yeah, this Untouchable score is just so good. And John Williams, of course, was nominated twice that year. one for Empire of the Sun, and the other one was The Witches of Eastwick. So John Williams just racking up those nominations.
Yeah, I still got to see those two.
How did this not get nominated for Best Picture?
I don't know, Shane. You know how weird the Academy is.
Well, all I know is if there was 10 films back then, this obviously would have been nominated. But do love Moonstruck. But like Moonstruck was nominated for Best Picture. Broadcast News was, which I do really love. Fatal Attraction of all movies was nominated for Best Picture. I don't recall seeing Hope and Glory. I might have seen that, but no, Untouchables should have been nominated for more things. And should have won more, but unfortunately it ran into the buzzsaw that was The Last Emperor.
Yeah,
For sure. Which like The Last Emperor is about the Dalai Lama, if I'm
right.
not mistaken. And like obviously that's a very significant story, but come on. This is like S tier, top tier gangster movies.
Mm.
So good. Um, but I guess at this point, which this is kind of like the last thing I did want to kind of segue into. Obviously, Griff, there's a lot of great mobster movies, gangster movies, crime movies like this. Where do you feel like The Untouchables kind of sits up there with the likes of, there's The Godfather, there's Goodfellas, where, literally tons of movies directed by Martin Scorsese.
Mhm. For me personally, I would put The Untouchables in the top five, along with The Godfather, Goodfellas, The Irishman, and actually too Dillinger, 1973, Warren Oates and Ben Johnson, which was
Nice.
John Milius's first movie that he directed.
Interesting. I have to check that out.
I'll let you
Um,
borrow that DVD too. He also directed The Wind and the Lion, and also in the Connery movie The Hunt for Red October. That's that scene where Connery's talking about the game of chess. Milius wrote that scene.
Well, that's the thing. John Milius definitely had a lot of fingerprints on a lot of movies, whether it's
Mm,
Apocalypse Now or Conan the Barbarian.
mm,
And he's also, lampooned in The Big Lebowski because that's who
yes.
John takes his look off of as Walter Sobchak, which I think is hilarious and actually very accurate. If you ever actually look up a picture of John Milius and Walter from The Big Lebowski, they could be twins.
Oh yeah. Milius even said himself that he and his kids love the Big Lebowski.
It's so much fun. Walter Sobchak is legitimately my favorite supporting character in any movie. Because I love John Goodman that much. But this is up in my top 25 favorite movies. Obviously, this is up there with The Godfather, Godfather Part 2,
Yeah.
um, Goodfellas, and like I'm a huge fan of like Casino. I love Casino. Um, I need to. I've seen The Irishman twice, and both times I loved it. I mean, so you'll appreciate this, Griff. Try to guess where I saw The Irishman in theaters.
Yeah, I remember you and I talked about it. You saw it at the same theater I saw it in Montgomery Cinemas, where I used to
Sure
work.
did. Which that was a because like Montgomery Cinemas doesn't have like updated seats and stuff like that. That was
Yeah.
a long 3.5 hours for my body sitting there, but it was still a great film for sure.
Yeah, that was something I definitely had to see on the big screen. I went with my friends Greg and George to see it, and it's funny because one of the audience members before the movie started said, "Oh yeah, my friend was in the scene where Hoff is doing his rally in Florida. Let's cheer when he comes on." So surely enough, when that scene came on, everybody cheered. It was all in unison. It was great to see. Oh yeah, and De Niro's most recent movie, The Alto Nights, which I really enjoyed. I saw that at Montgomery Cinemas too.
Nice. I saw that yesterday at one of my local AMC's. It's I'm trying to think like there's like the original Scarface from I think Howard Hawks.
Yeah,
I'm a
Paul
big
Muni. Yeah.
Yeah, big fan of that film. I watched that relatively recently. But there's a lot of great gangster films out there. And this is definitely up there. This is top tier. I hope that it's in that conversation more often. And this is definitely my favorite De Palma film. And I kind of think this is his masterpiece. Like it's that perfect mix of like his sensibilities and really hitting to like a next level. Because like you could tell some of his movies leading up to this, like he didn't get a huge budget. He didn't get to have like probably Scarface was probably his biggest budgeted film, obviously up to this point. But I appreciate the blowouts and the carries and stuff like that. But the Untouchables, it's untouchable to me.
Yeah, same with me,
Ah,
Shane. Yeah, The Untouchables, and even the first Mission Impossible movie. Of all the Brian De Palma movies I've seen, those two are probably my favorites of his.
there you go. Late 80s into the 90s, De Palma right there. But I'm going to leave you all on that joke. There you go. Untouchable. But Griff, thank you so much for coming on and always chatting movies with me.
Thank you, Shane. Always a pleasure, especially talking about the first R-rated movie I saw. It's been great, like all these years later.
I think The Godfather was definitely up there for me. I think the actual first R-rated movie I watched was Air Force One.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I had that on videotape too. I didn't see that in theaters. No, first R-rated. Oh, the first R-rated movie I saw in theaters was another mob movie, which I think would be in my top 10, Road to Perdition.
that movie's so damn good. More people need to talk about that movie. Oh, that cast is incredible.
Yeah, my
Paul
dad.
Newman.
Yeah, my dad said the day it came out, Tom Hanks and Paul Newman should both win Oscars for their roles. That's how strongly he felt about that.
They should have at least been nominated, but we don't want to talk about why. I actually don't understand why that didn't get more attention. It's a shame. But we love it. We here
Yeah.
at the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow love Road to Perdition, and you should go check it out. But thank all of you for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this episode. Obviously, you heard us talk a lot about crime thrillers and mob movies. What are some of your favorites? Make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. The SPDM Crew Podcasting Network is ever expanding. We have so many great shows at this point, whether it's movies and television and music and sports, basically trivia shows and Tolkien, which I love Lord of the Rings. Don't know that much about Tolkien to have a whole entire show about it. And all kinds of other great things. If you are interested in starting a show, please make sure to reach out. Or if you want to be a guest on some of ours, like Flicks and Chill or Mine the Wasteland Watch List, just make sure to reach out and let us know. And if you like our logo, this particular logo was done by our buddy Joe. Joe does a lot of great work in terms of animation and drawing. He has an Etsy store, and you should go check it out. We'll put some information in the comments, in the description on the video. But most importantly, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network.